Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. The current discourse buzzing on boardrooms centers around AI, and rightfully so. But as we and as leaders grapple to understand the implications of AI, it's actually not the technology that we're going to be struggling with the most. Nathan Furr confirms this in MIT's Tech Review Insight report this year. Nathan is an associate professor of strategy at INSEAD, a global graduate business school. And he sat down with Europe's best digital transformation firms and asked them, what's the cutting edge? And they said, it's not tech, it's organizational change that is cutting edge. Tirza, why is organizational transformation cutting edge?
Thanks, Helena. So there's a lot of things that go into why organizational change and the ability to transform your people, your teams, and your organization is going to be the cutting edge strategy for leading teams and organizations. And this is because competitiveness is really not just about what we're doing today, but really about where we're heading. Moving to where the puck or the technology is going requires that we're continuously transforming our ways of working and the products and services we're delivering. We're also going to need to be continuously integrating tech into our evolution. AI isn't just one thing. AI is a tool that is also going to change how every other tool is working. And so we're going to see this massive evolution in all of our tool sets and how we need to work with them and work with each other to take best advantage of these new skills that we have.
Mhm.
Those who are really wanting to stay at the forefront of innovation and stay competitive in this era are going to be the ones who really understand that they need to keep evolving as individuals, as teams, but then really ultimately in how their organizations function and work together.
Yeah, this is challenging though, when everything is changing. And I feel like a lot of the leaders are aware of this change and they're like, okay, we empower you. We encourage you to learn. So where are we getting stuck?
Well, as business model life cycles are getting shorter and shorter, I was telling you the story the other day of going into a museum at Siemens and seeing a piece of equipment, one of their early pieces of equipment that they manufactured the same thing for 50 years. Now, that's just an impossible thing to have. Life cycles of even hardware are a few years at most. And so we're needing to have integrated teams that are able to continuously evolve and create not just the business model, but all the marketing, the support, and the customer service that goes along with it. So change and evolution has to come much faster. We need to do this in all areas, not just at the technical level, but everything that supports a product or service.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we can't just like kind of cram that into the existing matrix business that you're used to delivering on a core strategy that doesn't change very much over like a longer period of time. We're needing to evolve quite quickly and have really rapidly forming teams. So those calcified processes and structures that people are confronted with are really challenging to this. And so you have middle management that's being expected to deliver on this new business model and these new marketing and services that go along with that business model, but they're stuck with these processes that are um, judging them and evaluating them based on old metrics that are keeping them using old processes and ways of decision making that keep things slow and mired down in bureaucracy. So it's not just simple to just say, like, go do this when they're actually being held to old processes that are calcified. And so we actually have to unstick not just what we're telling people or even the goals we're heading them at, but the entirety of our work process that middle management is needing to follow. And the challenging thing is there's very few resources to enable them. These are human problems where humans need to evolve their ways of working and they need to evolve the process. It's not enough to just bolt a new tool onto this. Human problems require a human solution. And part of the challenge is that we think we know how to do things and we have been really great at delivering, but now what we're needing to do is changing. And so how we do it needs to change.
Mhm. I couldn't agree more. And I think it really starts with this awareness of that being a human problem. Because I have been in such situations where it's like, okay, self-organize around this. And no one's really talking about how things were done in the past and how that's influencing how things are done now, existing processes, existing hierarchical structures that are limiting, collaboration between teams and all of these things. And they are human problems, structural problems as well, but it starts with people. And it's always interesting when you think it's the actual technological solution. You're just like, well, complexity is so high, and then you don't really know what to do with that challenge. And so I really think that, naming it and saying, yes, it is actually a human problem, and human problems require human solutions, is like the first step to actually understanding how we can make organizational transformation cutting edge. It's like focusing on people. um, what are the implications for this when we don't focus on people, when we don't focus on culture? What are we? What's happening?
Well, when we're not focusing on people, there's really a danger of people just tuning out when everything's changing. So they'll kind of keep doing things as they were doing them, or they'll just be like, everything's changing, so we can't count on anything. But what we need to be able to do now is change our processes, change our ways of working, and stay rigorous even as they're changing.
That's really challenging. That's I mean, how can we strike that balance between, it almost feels like rigor and flexibility at the same time. Um,
It really is rigor and flexibility at the same time. And so it's a little bit like, um, you know, when you're at the gate waiting for an airplane, and they're like, okay, the plane is going to be 30 minutes delayed. So you now need to kind of change what you're doing, or maybe you're going to go get something to eat. You're going to shift your plans. You're going to shift what you're doing. But if you're not rigorous to the new timeline, just because the plane's delayed doesn't mean they're going to wait for you. And so if you're not there when it's leaving, you're still not going to be like on the plane. So it's really important that we stay clear on our purpose. What are we actually trying to achieve here? And that we have the mindset and awareness that things are going to change along the way. And we need to stay situationally aware to what's happening and what the best way to deliver is now. So we need to have processes that, while they evolve, also ensure rigor. And so that's like such a key balance and requires a lot of us as leaders to be willing to evolve a process, hold ourselves to that new process with rigor, and then choose to evolve that process again. So,
mhm,
what that really requires of us is this continuous learning capacity, the willingness to learn how to do things anew and fresh. And we just need to own that that takes cognitive load. And as humans, we are really oriented toward reducing our cognitive load. It's because our brains require so much glucose, it takes a lot to feed them. And the more we're like actually changing our ways of working, the more it takes from our brain. We actually literally need more fuel. And so recognizing that we are doing like hard work and we need to fuel our brains appropriately. And that's not just about nutrition, but that's also about taking time to learn and taking time to restore.
mhm. I think that's so huge because, especially right now, when we're dealing with so much change fatigue, and we're kind of figuring out this balance between on-site, off-site, hybrid work, the workloads just seems to be climbing and climbing. I think like coming back to purpose. I mean, at least speaking from experiences for myself in the past, if we didn't have a clear understanding of what's the problem to be solved and who are we solving it for, and having that purpose, and being aligned under that, and then having the necessary processes, and rituals and practices that would allow us to continuously mobilize and unite under that purpose. We just kept sitting in alignment meetings and talking
Mm.
about technical features and wondering why people weren't agreeing on the features. And it was like a negative cycle that just kept, affecting morale, affecting fatigue, affecting our fulfillment and connection to our jobs as well, because we just feel like we're not able to get anything off the ground and anything moving forward. And it's, as you say, it's really being able to connect to purpose and hold that rigor and embrace the change with the help of these rituals and practices that allow for that ongoing change, and create that space for us to be flexible and to be learning as
Mhm.
we move. And I think that is so, so important, and that we actually take the time to be talking about these things. Again, as you said before, cutting edge is really about, understanding that we're dealing with a human problem here, and that requires a human solution, and it's not
Mhm.
necessarily technical. Um, how do leaders' perspectives and strategies have to change? What is that mental shift that has to happen in order to like realize that
Yeah.
we're dealing with a different type of beast here?
So, you know, we used to look to leaders to have the like expert perspective in the room. And we're really now at a time where nobody has expertise in what's happening now. You might have experience in business cycles and in transformation from the past, but right now, we really need to be, as leaders, gathering and harmonizing perspectives. And so, as leaders, it's really important to check our need to be right. When things are stressful and there's a heightened sense of risk, we as leaders, especially those taking deep responsibility for our return on investment, the health and safety of our organization, and the health and safety of our teams, tend to come with this high need to really get it right. The challenge is we don't have the right answers. We need to rely on our team to gather and harmonize and build the right answer. When we are trying to just dictate an approach in a world where things are moving quickly and decision making is distributed, even if our approach is kind of the right approach, if people are not aligned, the work will stop or slow. So, as leaders, it's vital that we move from this idea that we need to be the experts in the room to that we need to be the ones who are capable of gathering and harmonizing perspectives and presenting an aligned approach that everyone can align with and work toward.
I find that really challenging, right? Because let's be honest, people who have that expertise have been promoted into positions because of their expertise. That's been, the pat on the back. Good job. You have the answers, and we also need your answers.
Mhm,
And that that worked well in a world where we were, producing hardware, this
mm,
assembly line approach. And now a lot of companies are moving into software first approach, where it's like continuous iterations, continuous improvement. Whereas you say it's like really vital that the teams come up with the answers and the right solutions, guided through testing and experimentation. Um,
mhm.
and so I can observe how there's a lack or a fear, that's maybe the better way of putting it, and I'm kind of going off script here, but a fear of letting go of control,
Mhm,
step into that, and being able to like be aware that our position and our purpose personally as leaders or as managers is changing.
mhm.
um, just tapping into your own personal experiences, leadership journey. How do you personally let go and of control? What does that inner dialogue with yourself look like?
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm in a lot of pressurized leadership roles right now that are having me really look at and get great immediate feedback for how I'm showing up as a leader. And what's really helped me is understanding that increasingly work is distributed, and especially when working with um, our Gen Z and our millennial young leaders, that they won't just do something because someone said this is what needs to be done. They are going to do what they think should be done regardless. And so, if we don't have an aligned approach, then what we have is people independently working in different directions. So, appreciating that what I want to have is an aligned team that is collaborating and knows what everybody is doing, where people feel like they can rely on each other and there's a high trust, high ownership environment. And that maintaining my team and the coherence of my team is more important than me being right. or me being the one known for having the solution. So it becomes a really important question of what am I really dedicated to? Am I dedicated to my own ego, my own being seen as the leader, my being seen as the person with the answers, or am I dedicated to our purpose as a team and to the health and well-being and forward momentum of my team? So
Mhm.
it really becomes this shift in perspective from um, what am I being known for to what are we creating together? And it's that shift toward creation leadership that we talk about at Lumen, that willingness to be a creation leader, where I'm dedicated to what are we creating here together, not to my own individual need to be seen as an expert, because none of us are experts in the future. It hasn't come yet. And so, if we're going to create into the future, we need to accept that nobody really knows and that we need to gather all of those perspectives. Sometimes we talk about the parable of the blind man and the elephant, where we have five blind men coming at an elephant, and one man feels it and he's like, oh, it's like a trunk. It feels like a tree. And then another one is like, oh, no, it's a wall. And somebody else is like, oh, no, it's a snake as they're feeling the trunk, and each one of them has a perspective that is correct from where they stand, but doesn't give the whole picture. So, in
Mhm.
order to really have a whole picture on the situation, we need to have diverse perspectives and then harmonize those perspectives into our best guess as to what a coherent approach forward is. And then we take small bets to move us forward and we test what's actually working and what's happening.
Mhm.
This continuous beta approach to leadership, this willingness to be continuously testing and harmonizing our approach and then testing again, is really a radically new way of being. But it is what is required if we're going to lead our organizations into the future.
Mhm. I love that because at Lumen, we do talk about change happens at the individual level first, and you can only take your organization as far as you've been able to transform within yourself. And this really speaks to that. We're, building, I mean, if you look into the future leadership skills, they all talk about empathy, and that's where it starts. Trying to empathize with where is your team at? What does your team actually need from you? How are you listening to that? And how are you enabling them to bring their best selves forward and work together? And how are you facilitating that?
Exactly.
Um, I love that. How are we scaling this though? I mean, at an individual level, it all makes so much sense. And then as a CEO, as a business unit head, a leader overseeing multiple teams, how are we scaling this?
Yeah. It's really a great question. So, in any organization, you have people who are what we might think of as cultural catalysts. They're your innovators, they're your change makers. Sometimes they're kind of the noisy ones, like asking for change. But these are the people who are actually willing to put themselves forward, try something new, and lead others in new ways of working. And so, it's really vital that you identify those people and actually invest in them, because if all of your innovators leave your organization, which they will if they're not being listened to and included, then your organization is really left without your innovative people, and you cannot become an innovative organization if you don't have the people who are actually inclined to be at the edge. So once you've kind of identified those folks, and there are great tools for doing this, you need to invest in them making change a practice in your organization, providing them with the tools of change and building around them a culture of continuous evolution. So that requires psychological safety. It
Mhm.
requires ownership and clarity, where we're actually keeping track of what does it mean to be in ownership and how are we having conversations when things don't go through. In a lot of organizations, we've kind of gone to this really like, oh, we just kind of buy each other's stories about what hasn't worked rather than actually holding to, you said you were going to deliver this, what got in the way? And so being willing to have really honest, meaningful, developmental feedback conversations. And then ultimately, we need to make sure that we're keeping those innovators and catalysts in the organization by including them in planning cycles and including them in the strategic direction of the organization. This does mean including people in your planning and your strategy that you might not have thought were at the leadership level that you needed them to be. But your innovators and your catalysts are the ones with the capacity to kind of see over the horizon of time and understand what's changing in the world and with your customers and what needs to change in the organization to stay current.
I love this because when I was part one of those change ambassadors in previous roles, right? And
Mhm,
what was really frustrating is that we only talked about awareness, raising awareness on these topics. And so we would gain our own awareness on, the cultural values that the company was trying to push and which are needed. We need those guiding cultural values at the top, coming from the top. But then we weren't really equipped with the tools of, okay, how are we going to execute on this? What does
mhm,
it actually mean at work during when we're confronted with the challenges of how we do things together? What does that actually mean to start doing things differently and build psychological safety? This is something that needs to be entrained. What are tools so that we can have conversations around ownership and responsibility? What does that even look like within myself? How do I deal when someone doesn't really agree to take ownership responsibility, is resisting that, right? That's really challenging. And how are we, building, and what tools are we using for learning and growth? I was not aware that we needed to have rituals and practices integrated in our processes. Um,
mhm.
so I really agree, and I really think that you're hitting the nail on the head by saying that these things need to be entrained, and that actually moves these change ambassadors and teams ultimately, over that line from awareness into actually executing on new strategies. I also love the aspect that you said, including people in strategy. And so this part of caring about your people and co-creating with them.
Yeah, I think it's useful for us to appreciate that we're in this big change moment about how work gets done. So, because AI and having these tools embedded in everything we do is going to create a real fundamental shift in how work happens. And it's a little like the shift that we had from the gas-powered car to electric cars. And while we're making this shift, we've kind of tried some weird things along the way. Like there's a couple of models out there that were actually trying to be both. They had a full gas-powered car, and then they also added like the electric capacity. And the result is that you actually have a car that's pretty bad at both. The batteries make the car really heavy, driving down your gas mileage, but having the entire separate system of engines and um, clutches that are required to have uh, a gas powered car means that your electric car is actually not very good either and has almost no range. And never mind the fact that you literally have no trunk in those cars, you have no storage, they become very uncomfortable. And so when you just bolt on an extra tool to an existing core, you generally have something that's kind of bad at both.
Mm,
So that in order to really evolve to this new way of doing things, we get to reimagine how our organizations are working in order to not just bolt AI onto the edge and get bad at both, incorporating it and doing what we're doing, but actually evolving how we're getting the work done. And
mm,
it's a big moment that requires not just a change in technology or a bolt on of technology, but ultimately like new foundational capacities so that we can continuously evolve at speed.
mm. I love that. Thank you so much. So if you two out there are interested in, developing your cutting edge and turning organizational change into your cutting edge and building a fleet of people who have these leadership capacities and the mindsets and want to be entrained with the tools of change to make it not just a one-time event but an ongoing practice, connect with us. We teach these tools of change, innovation for mindset and behavior change. We develop people with the capacity to transform their teams, who are self-empowered and can evolve processes as they go. So thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you in September, taking a little break, on how to ignite yourself, your career, take yourself to the next level by becoming an intrapreneur, as we call it, someone who innovates like an entrepreneur inside a huge corporation regardless of whether you're a product manager, an HR leader, you're in finance. We're going to be talking to Laria about the success story of entrepreneurship at Siemens. So make sure you go over and register. I'm super excited. This success story has actually transformed over 500 people at Siemens. So stay tuned and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.